My name is Grace Ellington. I was 31 years old when my billionaire father stood up at my wedding, looked straight at my 6-year-old daughter, and said, "Your child deserves better than a cheap replacement father." The room went silent. 200 guests stared at me in my wedding dress, while my little girl, Lily, lowered her head like she had done something wrong. My husband, Daniel, did not shout. He did not threaten my father. He simply reached for Lily's hand and whispered, "You never have to believe people who confuse money with worth." And that was when Lily looked up at me with confused eyes and said, just loud enough for the front table to hear, "Mommy, isn't Daniel the man from the building where bad rich people get arrested?" My father stopped smiling. At the time, I did not understand why. But 6 months later, when Daniel walked into my father's glass office, placed a federal badge on the table, and said, "Mr. Ellington, I'm the auditor assigned to your contracts," I finally understood why my husband had stayed so calm that night. He had not been weak. He had been waiting. And my father had humiliated the only man in the room who already knew where the bodies were buried. Not literal bodies. That would have been easier for my father to deny. My father's crimes were written in signatures, invoices, shell companies, hospital contracts, and numbers so polished they looked clean to anyone who did not know where to look. But I knew how to look, and Daniel knew how to prove it. Before I tell you how my father lost everything he tried to steal from me, you need to understand the kind of man Charles Ellington was. To the public, my father was a visionary. That was the word magazines love to use. Visionary. He owned Ellington Medical Developments, one of the largest private hospital construction companies in the state. If a city needed a new surgical wing, my father's company bid on it. If a wealthy donor wanted their name on a children's hospital, my father appeared beside them in a navy suit and a silver tie, shaking hands for the cameras. He donated to medical charities. He sat on hospital boards. He gave speeches about legacy, responsibility, and the future of healthcare. People stood when he entered rooms. They leaned in when he spoke. They laughed at jokes that were not funny, and they called him generous because he gave away small pieces of what he had taken in secret. At home, he was not generous. At home, everything had a price. Love had a price, approval had a price, even grief had a price. My mother died when I was 23. Her name was Elena, and she was the only person in our family who never made me feel like I had to earn my place at the table. She used to tell me, "Grace, quiet does not mean weak. Sometimes quiet is where strong people keep their plans." After she died, my father stopped pretending to be gentle. He remarried 14 months later to Victoria, a woman with perfect posture, perfect hair, and a talent for making insults sound like advice. Victoria never raised her voice. She did not need to. She could destroy you with a smile and a sentence. My half-sister, Brooke, was Victoria's daughter from a previous marriage. But my father treated her like the daughter he wished he had raised from birth. Brooke was beautiful, polished, and cruel in a way people excused because she wore designer clothes and said, "Just kidding," after every wound. I was different. I did not want my father's company. I did not want his parties. I did not want to sit at charity dinners beside men who talked about suffering like it was an investment opportunity. I worked as a hospital billing coordinator. My father hated that, not because the job was shameful, but because it was ordinary. "You process invoices, Grace," he told me once. Don't confuse that with understanding business. That sentence stayed with me. Because the truth was, processing invoices taught me more about people than any business school could have. Numbers have habits. Liars have patterns. Fraud has a rhythm. At the private hospital where I worked, I reviewed billing discrepancies, corrected insurance coding errors, and chased down missing documentation before claims were sent out. It was boring to people like my father, but boring work reveals things powerful people miss. That was I first noticed something strange. A charge for surgical lighting equipment appeared twice under two different vendor names. The first vendor was familiar. The second one was not. I clicked deeper. The second vendor had a mailing address that matched an office building my father's company used for smaller subsidiaries. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Then I saw another duplicated charge. Then another. Different hospital, different department, same pattern. Equipment billed twice. Construction labor billed under two names. And consulting fees attached to projects that had been delayed for months. The paperwork was clean enough to pass a quick review, but not clean enough to pass someone who had spent years looking for mismatched codes and lazy lies. One of the companies was called Northline Medical Logistics. I had never heard my father mention it, but when I searched the internal vendor notes, I found a contact email that ended with a domain connected to Ellington Medical Developments. My stomach tightened. I printed one page, just one. I folded it into my purse and told myself I would ask him privately. That was my first mistake. I still thought my father could be approached like a father. 2 nights later, he invited me to dinner at his house. Not because he missed me. Charles Ellington did not miss people. He summoned them. The house sat behind iron gates on a hill that overlooked the city. It was all glass, stone, and silence. My mother had once filled that house with warm lamps and fresh flowers. Victoria had turned it into a museum where no one was allowed to breathe too loudly. Dinner was served at a table long enough to make intimacy impossible. My father sat at one end, Victoria sat at the other. Brooke sat beside him, scrolling through her phone. Lily sat beside me, carefully placing peas in a circle around her plate. Daniel was not in our lives yet. Back then, it was just me and Lily. Lily's father had left when she was 2. He sent birthday cards for a year, then nothing. My father never let me forget that. Poor choices create lifelong consequences, he liked to say, while looking at Lily as if she were a receipt for my failure. That night, after dessert, I took the folded invoice from my purse. "Dad," I said carefully, "can I ask you about something?" I saw a vendor connected to one of our hospital contracts. Northline Medical Logistics. "Is that one of yours?" The table changed. Not visibly. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but I saw my father's pause over his coffee cup. Victoria's eyes shifted to him. Brooke stopped scrolling. My father looked at the paper, then at me. "Where did you get that?" "At work. It came through billing review." "You printed internal documentation?" "It was connected to a duplicate charge." His expression hardened. "You process invoices, Grace. Don't pretend you understand empires." I felt my face burn. "I'm not pretending. I'm asking because it looked wrong." He leaned back in his chair. Wrong to whom? A woman who couldn't keep a husband. A woman raising a child alone in an apartment I helped pay for. A woman whose greatest professional achievement is catching typos in hospital bills. Lily looked up. She was 6, but children understand tone before they understand words. "Grandpa," she said softly, "Mommy works hard. My father did not even look at her. That is not the same as working smart." I folded the paper. I should have left then. Instead, I apologized. That is what years of being trained by a man like Charles Ellington does to you. It makes you apologize for noticing the knife. 3 weeks later, I met Daniel Reed. It happened at Lily's community center. The center ran an after-school program for children whose parents worked late. I had volunteered there on weekends since Lily was 4, helping organize paperwork, supplies, and the occasional fundraiser. One Saturday morning, the sink in the art room flooded. Water spread across the floor while teachers lifted boxes of crayons and construction paper onto chairs. I was kneeling with a stack of paper towels when a man in faded jeans walked in carrying a toolbox. He had dark blonde hair, tired eyes, and the calm energy of someone who had already seen enough chaos in life to stop being impressed by it. "Where's the shutoff valve?" he asked. Nobody knew. He found it in 90 seconds. Then he fixed the leak without making anyone feel stupid. Lily watched him like he was performing magic. When he finished, she asked, "Are you a plumber?" He smiled. "No, just someone who knows water usually wins if you argue with it." She giggled. That was Daniel. He never tried to impress a room. He just solved the problem in front of him. Over the next month, I saw him at the center often. He repaired a broken bookshelf. He helped repaint the back hallway. He replaced a loose railing by the side entrance. I assumed he worked maintenance somewhere. He did not correct me. One afternoon, I found him outside helping Lily fix the chain on her bicycle. She says it makes a monster sound, he said. It does, Lily insisted. A tiny metal monster. Daniel nodded seriously. Then we should negotiate with it. Lily laughed harder than I had heard her laugh in months. That was when I started falling in love with him. Not in a dramatic movie way, not all at once. I fell in love with the way he listened when Lily spoke. I fell in love with how he never interrupted me. I fell in love with how he noticed when I was tired and did not demand that I explain why. Our first real date was at a small diner near the hospital. He wore a gray sweater with a tiny repair at the cuff. I noticed it immediately because, in my father's world, a repaired cuff would have been treated like a moral failure. Daniel saw me looking and said, "I know, very glamorous." I smiled. I wasn't judging. "I know," he said. That's why I mentioned it. There was something disarming about him. He did not seem embarrassed by modest things. He did not perform poverty or wealth. He simply existed without asking anyone's permission. When I asked what he did for work, he gave a vague answer. Government contracts, mostly financial review. That sounds complicated. Sometimes. Mostly it's patterns, I laughed. That's funny. My job is mostly patterns too. He looked interested. Not polite, interested. So I told him about billing codes, duplicate charges, insurance disputes, and how people think paperwork is dull until paperwork proves someone lied. He listened so closely that I almost told him about Northline. Almost. But my father had already made me feel foolish for mentioning it once. So I swallowed the thought. Daniel met my father 3 months later. It went exactly as badly as I expected. My father invited us to brunch at the country club. That should have been my warning. Charles Ellington did not invite people to brunch. He staged evaluations. Daniel arrived in clean slacks, a white shirt, and a navy jacket that was clearly not expensive, but fit him well. I thought he looked handsome. Victoria looked him up and down like he was a stain. Brooke smiled. "Oh, Grace," she said. "You didn't say he was practical." Daniel shook her hand anyway. "Nice to meet you. My father did not stand. So," he said, "Daniel Reed. What exactly do you do?" Daniel sat beside me. "I review contract compliance. For whom? Federal programs, mostly." My father's eyes narrowed for half a second. Then he smiled. "Ah, a bureaucrat." Daniel did not react. "Some days." Brooke laughed. Victoria lifted her mimosa. "How stable." Grace has always needed stable after her little mistakes. Her eyes moved toward Lily, who was coloring quietly beside me. My jaw tightened. Daniel noticed. He leaned slightly toward Lily and said, "That's a great turtle." "It's a dragon," Lily said. "My mistake. Very fierce dragon." Lily beamed. My father watched that exchange with open contempt. Later, while Victoria took Lily to look at the club's garden, and Brooke pretended to take a call, my father asked Daniel to walk with him. I wanted to go too. Daniel touched my hand. "It's okay." They walked out to the terrace. I could not hear everything. But I saw my father's posture. Relaxed, dominant, predatory. When Daniel came back, his expression had not changed. "What did he say?" I asked in the car. Daniel started the engine. "He offered me money." My chest went cold. "What?" "To leave before things got embarrassing." I closed my eyes. "How much?" Enough to tell me he was scared. I looked at him. "Scared?" "My father doesn't get scared. He gets disgusted." Daniel glanced at me. Sometimes those look the same. I did not understand that then. I would later. When Daniel proposed, it was not elaborate. He asked me in my kitchen while Lily was asleep in the next room, and rain tapped softly against the window. He did not kneel at first. He stood there holding a small velvet box, looking more nervous than I had ever seen him. "I don't have a family name that opens doors," he said. "I don't have a house on a hill. I don't have your father's approval, and I don't want to buy it. But I love you. I love Lily. I know what it means to stay. So if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving that." I cried before he even opened the box. The ring was simple, a small oval diamond on a thin gold band. Perfect. When I told my father, he laughed. Not loudly, worse. He gave one short breath through his nose, like I had told him a joke beneath his intelligence. "You cannot be serious. I am, Grace. Men like that do not marry women like you because of love." "Men like what?" "Small men. Men with government salaries. Men who look at families like ours and see rescue. I stood in his office with my hands clasped so tightly my nails hurt. Daniel has never asked me for anything. Not yet. I love him. My father's face hardened. You loved Lily's father too. That hit exactly where he intended, I whispered. That was cruel. No, that was history. Then he stood and walked to the window, overlooking the city. If you marry him, do not expect me to support the mistake. I'm not asking you to support it. Yes, you are. You always are. Emotionally, financially, socially. You want rebellion with a safety net. I want my father at my wedding. He turned back and understands the difference between romance and self-destruction. For 3 days, he did not call. Then Victoria called. Her voice was honey over glass. Your father has decided to help with the wedding. I should have refused. I know that now. But part of me was still the daughter who wanted to believe there was love underneath his control. Victoria said they would cover the venue. Brooke offered to help with presentation. My father said he would walk me down the aisle. Lily was excited. Daniel was cautious. Grace, he said one night, you don't owe them access to a day they don't respect. I know, but I wanted peace. That was another mistake. People like my father do not attend peace, they attend leverage. The sabotage began quietly. Victoria insisted on approving Daniel's suit. It's not about judgment, she said. It's about cohesion. She sent over a tailor. The suit that arrived 2 weeks later was too large in the shoulders and too short at the wrists. Daniel tried it on in my apartment and looked at himself in the mirror. Lily tilted her head. You look like you borrowed a tall man's clothes. Daniel nodded. That is a fair review. I wanted to scream. Daniel just changed back into his own jacket and said, I'll handle it. Brooke planned a bridal lunch. At the table, in front of 12 women, she lifted her glass and said, to Grace, proof that no matter how much money you grow up around, some girls still choose coupons. Everyone laughed. I sat there smiling with my throat burning. Then Brooke leaned closer and whispered, does Daniel know which fork to use, or should we label them? I left early. That night, Daniel found me sitting on the bathroom floor in my robe. He lowered himself beside me without asking questions. I hate that I still want them to love me, I said. That doesn't make you weak. It feels weak. No, he said. It means you kept a soft place in you longer than they deserved. A week before the wedding, my father called Daniel directly. Daniel told me about it afterward. Charles had asked him to meet at a private cigar lounge downtown. Daniel went. I still do not know why. Maybe because he already understood more than he had told me. My father slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a cashier's check, $250,000. Name your price, my father said. Men like you always have one. Daniel looked at the check. Then he pushed it back. I'm not for sale. My father smiled. Everyone is for sale. The only difference is whether they admit it before or after they embarrass themselves. Daniel stood. Then I guess you and I are different kinds of men. My father's expression changed. Just a little. Daniel told me later that was the first time he saw fear in my father's eyes. Not fear of Daniel physically. Fear of a man who could not be bought. The day before the wedding, I found Daniel in the living room looking through a folder of old documents I had left on the coffee table. They were forms my father had asked me to sign after my mother died. Trust paperwork, property acknowledgments, family office documents, things I had signed because I was grieving and 23 and still believed my father would never use my name to hurt me. Daniel held one page longer than the others. What is it? I asked. Did you sign this in person? I don't remember. Was there a notary? I don't remember, Daniel. That whole year is foggy. He nodded slowly. Do you have copies of everything? Probably in storage. I need you to keep them. Why? He looked at me for a long moment. Because someday your father may try to convince you that you gave away more than you did. A chill moved through me. Daniel, is there something you're not telling me? Yes, the honesty startled me. He came closer. But not because I don't trust you. Because telling you too early could put you in a position where you have to lie under pressure. And I will not do that to you. I stared at him. Are we safe? He touched my face gently. You and Lily? With me, yes. That should have frightened me. Instead, it made something in me settle. The wedding was held at the Rosemont Grand Hotel. Crystal chandeliers, white orchids, gold chairs, a string quartet near the entrance. Everything looked expensive enough to impress people who measured love in receipts. I wore my mother's pearl earrings. Not the diamond set Victoria wanted me to wear. My dress was simple, fitted at the waist, with lace sleeves and a low back. When Lily saw me, she gasped, "Mommy, you look like the good queen at the end of the story." I hugged her carefully so I would not cry. Daniel waited at the altar in a dark suit that actually fit him. Not designer, not flashy, just right. When I walked down the aisle, I did not look at my father. I looked at Daniel. For a few minutes, I forgot everything else. I forgot my father's warnings. I forgot Victoria's smile. I forgot Brooke recording little clips for whatever cruel caption she planned to write. Later, I said my vows. Daniel said his. Lily carried the rings and whispered, "Don't drop them," so seriously that half the front row laughed. For one brief hour, I believed the worst was behind us. Then came the reception. My father waited until dinner was served, until the champagne was poured, until cameras were raised. Then he stood. The room quieted immediately. Charles Ellington knew how to command silence. He lifted his glass. "I have given many speeches in my life," he began, "at hospitals, charity galas, boardrooms, and award ceremonies. But tonight, I find myself giving the most difficult speech of all, a father's speech." People smiled politely. I felt Daniel's hand find mine under the table. My father continued. "When Grace was a little girl, her mother and I imagined a certain life for her, a life of dignity, a life of purpose, a life that honored the name she was born into." Victoria looked down at her plate, hiding a smile. Brooke raised her phone. My heart started pounding. "But children grow up," my father said, "and sometimes they mistake defiance for strength. Sometimes they confuse attention with love. Sometimes they choose a smaller life and demand that everyone else applaud it." The room shifted. Guests looked at me, then at Daniel. My father turned toward us. Grace had every opportunity to marry into her own class. Instead, she chose a man who can't even afford the shoes he's standing in. A few people laughed. Not many, but enough. Heat rushed to my face. Daniel did not move. My father looked satisfied, then his eyes dropped to Lily. "And what saddens me most," he said, "is that an innocent child is now expected to call this man family." My body went cold. "Dad," I said quietly. He ignored me. He looked directly at my daughter. "Lily, your child deserves better than a cheap replacement father." The whole room froze. Lily's smile disappeared. She looked down at her little white shoes. Something inside me cracked. I started to stand, but Daniel was already moving. Not toward my father, toward Lily. He crouched beside her chair, blocking her from the room as much as he could. "Look at me, kiddo," he said softly. She looked at him with wet eyes. He adjusted the small ribbon on her dress and said, "You never have to believe people who confuse money with worth." She sniffed. "Even Grandpa? Especially people who should know better." That was when Lily looked at me, confused, hurt, trying to make sense of adult cruelty with a child's honest memory. "Mommy," she whispered, "isn't Daniel the man from the building where bad rich people get arrested?" The words landed like a glass breaking. Only the front tables heard clearly. But my father heard. His face changed. For the first time all night, Charles Ellington looked unsure. Daniel's eyes moved to Lily, then to me, not angry, careful, as if she had accidentally opened a door he had been holding shut. My father recovered quickly. "What a strange thing for a child to say," he said, forcing a laugh. But his hand trembled around the champagne glass. I saw it. Daniel saw it. And somehow I knew my father saw Daniel seeing it. The rest of the reception blurred. My father announced, with cold formality, that from that night forward, I would no longer have access to the family trust. He said I had chosen independence, and he would respect it. He said the lake house my mother loved would remain under Ellington control. He said I was free to live the small life I had chosen. Every sentence was designed to sound reasonable to guests and devastating to me. By the end, I was no longer crying. I was too still for tears. When we left, no one from my family stopped us. Brooke posted a video before midnight. The caption read, "When the princess chooses the discount ending." She deleted it later. Not soon enough. That night, in our hotel room, I took off my wedding dress in silence. Daniel helped Lily out of her flower girl shoes and tucked her into the second bed. She had cried herself tired. When she was asleep, I turned to him. What did she mean? Daniel looked toward the window. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he removed his tie and sat across from me. 3 months ago, you took Lily to a pediatric appointment near the federal building downtown. I remembered. She saw me leaving. You told me you were at a meeting. I was. What kind of meeting? He folded his hands. Grace, I review federal medical development contracts. Some of those contracts connect to your father's companies. My mouth went dry. How long have you known that he was under review? Before I met you. I stood. The room tilted. You knew who I was? No, not at first. I knew Ellington Medical Developments. I did not know you were his daughter until after we met. But you kept dating me. Yes, Daniel. I offered to transfer the file. That stopped me. What? When I realized who you were, I disclosed the conflict. I asked to be removed. My supervisor reviewed it. At that stage, I wasn't the lead investigator. I was doing pattern analysis. They allowed me to continue with restrictions because I had no access to you through the case, and I never asked you for information. But you did ask me to keep documents. After your father started targeting you legally, that was about protecting you, not building the case. I wanted to be angry. A part of me was. But underneath it was something worse. Recognition. Northline. The duplicate charges. My father's reaction. The papers Daniel had studied before the wedding. What is he doing? I whispered. Daniel's face softened. We believe his company used shell vendors to inflate hospital construction costs and bill federal programs for equipment. That was never delivered. There may also be forged approvals connected to family-controlled trusts. My knees weakened. Forged approvals? He nodded. Some documents have your name on them. I sat down slowly. No, I'm sorry. I didn't sign anything like that. I believe you. Those 3 words broke me more than the accusation would have. I believe you. My father had never said that to me in my life. Daniel moved beside me, but he did not touch me until I reached for him. What happens now? I asked. Now you decide whether you want to keep pretending he is just cruel, or whether you are ready to accept that he is dangerous. The next morning, I opened the storage unit where I kept my mother's things. Daniel came with me. Lily stayed with a friend from the community center. The storage unit smelled like dust, cardboard, and old perfume. My mother's dresses hung in garment bags along one wall. Boxes of books were stacked beside framed photographs, Christmas ornaments, and lamps Victoria had removed from the house after the funeral. In the back, I found the plastic file basins from the year my mother died. I had avoided them for 8 years. Grief has a way of turning paper into landmines. Daniel carried them to the car without rushing me. At home, we sorted everything across the dining table: trust amendments, property transfers, board consent forms, medical foundation documents. My signature appeared again and again. Sometimes real, sometimes not. I could tell because my real signature had changed after my mother died. It became less careful, more slanted. The forged signatures looked like someone had practiced from an older driver's license. Daniel photographed everything. I watched his face as he worked, focused, controlled, angry in a way he did not let spill. Then I found the lake house file. The lake house had belonged to my mother before she married my father. She inherited it from her parents. It was small compared to my father's properties, but it was the only place where I remembered her being completely at peace. After she died, my father told me the house had been folded into the family trust. I believed him. But the document in my hand said something else. My mother had placed the house in a separate trust. For me, not my father, me. There was a later amendment transferring management authority to Charles Ellington. The signature at the bottom was mine. Except it was not. I stared at it until the letters blurred. He stole her house from me, I said. Daniel's jaw tightened. He tried. For the next 6 months, We lived quietly. That was the hardest part. People think revenge feels like fire. Sometimes it feels like silence. It feels like going to work while your family laughs about you in group chats. It feels like taking your daughter to school while lawyers review proof that your father used your grief as a business tool. It feels like wanting to scream and choosing documentation instead. My father sent one message 2 weeks after the wedding. You embarrassed yourself. I hope marriage to mediocrity was worth it. I did not reply. Victoria sent a box of my childhood belongings to my apartment. No note, just a box. Inside were school awards, old photographs, and a framed picture of my mother and me at the lake house. The frame was cracked, maybe by accident, maybe not. Brooke continued posting little comments online. Nothing direct enough to look cruel to outsiders, just enough. Some people downgrade and call it healing. Bloodline matters. Standards are self-respect. I stopped looking. Daniel did not. He saved everything. Not because social media insults were crimes, because people like Brooke often revealed more than they meant to when they were performing superiority. One night, she posted a photo from my father's office. Behind her, on his desk, was a folder with the Northline Medical Logistics logo. Daniel saw it before she deleted it. He sent it to his supervisor, another piece. At work, I quietly requested copies of vendor irregularity reports I had filed before the wedding. Nothing confidential, nothing illegal, just my own records. I made a timeline, Northline charges, duplicate equipment invoices, delayed surgical wing payments, consulting fees, patient foundation transfers. The pattern became clearer. My father's companies were not just overbilling hospitals. They were using charitable medical foundations as pass-through accounts. Money meant for patient care had been redirected into development fees, shell vendors, and executive consulting. I got sick the first time I saw it laid out. It is one thing to suspect your father is corrupt. It is another to understand that his corruption wore a ribbon at charity events and smiled beside sick children. Daniel never pushed me. He would ask, "Do you want to stop for tonight?" Sometimes I said yes. Sometimes I said no. Lily noticed the tension, of course. Children always do. One night, while Daniel washed dishes, she climbed into my lap and asked, "Is Grandpa mad because Daniel catches bad rich people?" I closed my eyes. Grandpa is mad because he thinks money means he can hurt people. She thought about that. But Daniel has money? I almost laughed. No, sweetheart. Not like Grandpa. Then how can he win? Daniel turned off the sink. He looked at her and said, "Because the truth doesn't need to be rich. It just needs to be kept safe long enough." Lily nodded like that made perfect sense. Maybe it did. The call came in early March. My father's assistant, Marla, contacted me from a private number. She sounded nervous. "Your father wants you at the office Friday morning. Why?" "There are documents regarding the lake property." My hand tightened around the phone. "What documents?" "I'm not authorized to discuss them." "Then tell him to send them to my lawyer." A pause. "Mr. Ellington said this is a family matter." I almost smiled. Family matter. That was what powerful people called legal threats when they wanted you alone. Daniel was across the kitchen, packing Lily's lunch. I put the phone on speaker. Marla cleared her throat. "He said if you bring your husband, the meeting is canceled." Daniel looked up. For the first time in weeks, I saw something almost amused in his eyes. I said, "Tell my father I'll be there at 10. After I hung up, Daniel asked, "Are you ready?" I knew what he meant. Not ready to attend, ready to stop protecting him. I looked at the framed photo of my mother on the shelf, then at Lily's backpack by the door, then at the man my father had called cheap because he did not understand the cost of integrity. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." That Friday, we walked into Ellington Tower together. The lobby was marble and glass, with a water feature running down one wall. My father's company logo hung behind the reception desk in brushed steel letters. I had been there many times growing up. As a child, I thought the building was magical. As an adult, I realized it was designed to make people feel small. Daniel wore a dark suit. Plain. Professional. No flashy watch, no expensive shoes. Just calm. The receptionist looked at him, then at me. Mr. Ellington requested that Mrs. Reed come alone. I said, Mrs. Reed is not alone. Daniel showed an ID, not the badge yet, just enough. The receptionist's expression changed. She made a call. We were sent up. My father's office occupied the top floor. Of course it did. He stood by the window when we entered, exactly as he had the day he warned me not to marry Daniel. Victoria sat on the leather sofa. Brooke stood near the bar cart, arms crossed, already smiling. A company lawyer sat at the conference table with a stack of papers. My father looked at Daniel and laughed softly. You brought your discount husband to a legal meeting? Daniel pulled out a chair for me. No, he said. She brought the federal auditor assigned to your contracts. The room went completely still. Not quiet. Still. There is a difference. Quiet is the absence of sound. Stillness is the moment before consequences arrive. My father stared at Daniel. Then he smiled. It was impressive. Honestly, the speed with which he rebuilt his face. I beg your pardon? Daniel opened his jacket and placed his badge on the table. My name is Daniel Reed. I'm attached to the Federal Review Team investigating contract fraud involving Ellington Medical Developments, Northline Medical Logistics, and Associated Medical Foundation accounts. Brooke's smile vanished. Victoria's hand moved to her necklace. The lawyer stood halfway. My client will not be speaking without counsel present. Daniel looked at him. Good. He shouldn't. My father's eyes moved to me. You knew? I met his stare. No, I learned. There's a difference. He pointed at Daniel. This is entrapment. Daniel shook his head. No, Mr. Ellington. Entrapment would require me to make you commit fraud. You managed that without my help, the lawyer said. This meeting is over. Daniel placed a folder on the table. It can be, but before we leave, Mrs. Reed's counsel has already received copies of the property documents related to the Elena Marquez Lake Trust. The transfer amendment you attempted to enforce contains a forged signature. My father's face hardened. That is a family estate matter. I finally spoke. No, it was my mother's house. He looked at me like I was a child interrupting adults. You have no idea what your mother wanted. I opened my bag and took out the original trust document. My mother wanted me to have it. Victoria said, Grace, grief makes people sentimental. That doesn't make them competent. I turned to her. For 8 years, I thought silence made me respectful. It didn't. It made me convenient. She looked away first. That gave me strength. Daniel laid out the evidence with devastating calm. Duplicate invoices billed through 2 vendors. Equipment purchases charged, but never delivered. Internal emails referencing family approvals. Foundation transfers disguised as development consulting. A notary stamp used on dates when the notary was out of state. My father's signature authorizing Northline contracts. Brooke's deleted photo from his office. And then, the wedding video. The one Brooke had posted to humiliate me. Daniel played only 12 seconds. My father's voice filled the room. From tonight on, Grace is free to live the small life she chose. The Northline matter remains where it belongs. I remembered that line. At the wedding, I had barely heard it through the blood rushing in my ears. But Daniel had heard it. My father had mentioned Northline publicly because he was drunk on power and wanted me to know he controlled things I did not understand. That sentence tied him directly to a shell vendor he had denied managing. Daniel stopped the video. Thank you, Brooke, he said. Brooke whispered, I didn't know. Daniel looked at her. No, you just thought cruelty had no record. My father turned on her with such rage that she physically stepped back. That was when I saw the truth. He did not love Brooke more than me. He loved usefulness, and the moment she became inconvenient, she was no safer than I had ever been. The company lawyer asked for a recess. Daniel said federal agents were already serving document preservation orders downstairs. My father looked out the window. For the first time in my life, he seemed smaller than the room he stood in. Then he turned to me. Grace, he said, softening his voice, you don't want to do this. There it was. Not an apology. A strategy. I said nothing. He stepped closer. You are my daughter. I almost laughed. 6 months earlier, in front of 200 people, he had said I was no daughter of his. Now that consequences had arrived, biology had become useful again. You disowned me at my wedding, I said. I was angry. You humiliated my child. She is a child. She'll forget. That was the last thing he ever said to me as my father. Because in that moment, whatever daughter remained in me finally stood up and walked away from him. No, I said. She won't. But I'll make sure she remembers who protected her. He looked at Daniel. You think he protected you? He used you. Daniel did not respond. I did. He believed me. That was more protection than you ever gave me. My father's face twisted. You'll regret this when everything I built is gone. I picked up my mother's trust document. No, I'll regret that I ever thought what you built was worth saving. We left before the agents came upstairs. I did not need to watch him be cornered. That was not the revenge. The revenge was walking out without asking him to love me. The investigation became public 3 weeks later. At first, the headlines were careful. Ellington Medical Developments under federal review. Then they got sharper. Hospital contractor accused of inflated billing scheme. Then the foundation accounts came out. That was when the public turned. People can forgive rich men stealing from other rich men. They are less forgiving when children's hospital donations disappear into consulting fees. Contracts were suspended. Board members resigned. My father stepped down temporarily, then permanently. Northline Medical Logistics dissolved within a month. Victoria moved out of the house on the hill before the summer. Brooke deleted most of her social media and tried to rebrand herself as a wellness advocate, which would have been funny if I had enough energy left to laugh. The lake house took longer. Legal things always do. But the forged amendment collapsed quickly once the notary records were reviewed. My mother's original trust held. The house was mine. The first time I took Lily there, it was late afternoon. The lake was silver under the cloudy sky. The porch needed work. The garden was overgrown. A shutter hung crooked beside the kitchen window. It was not glamorous. It was not impressive. It was home. Lily ran down the path toward the dock, then stopped and looked back. Can I go close to the water? Daniel called. Not without one of us. She sighed dramatically. You always say safety things. He smiled. That's how I stay employed as a boring adult. I stood on the porch holding the key. For years, I thought my father had taken that house because he had the right. Now I understood. He took it because he could. And for a long time, no one stopped him. Daniel came up beside me. You okay? I nodded, then shook my head, then nodded again. I don't know, that's allowed. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and dust. Most of the furniture was covered in white sheets. In the main bedroom, I found a small box in the closet. Inside were letters from my mother. Not dramatic secrets, not hidden millions, just letters. One had my name on it, Grace. My hands shook when I opened it. My mother's handwriting filled the page. She wrote that she knew my father would try to make love feel conditional. She wrote that she was sorry if she had not protected me enough. She wrote that the lake house was mine because everyone deserves one place where they are not required to perform. At the bottom, she had written, quiet does not mean weak. Let your quiet become a door, not a cage. I sat on the floor and cried until Lily found me. She crawled into my lap. Daniel sat beside us. None of us said much. We did not need to. A month later, I received a letter from my father. Not handwritten. Of course not. Typed. Reviewed by attorneys, probably. He said mistakes had been made. He said the media had exaggerated. He said Daniel had turned me against my blood. He said family should not destroy family. He did not say, I'm sorry. He did not say Lily's name. I read it once. Then I placed it in a drawer with the other documents. Not because it mattered, because evidence had become a habit. My life did not become perfect after that. That is not how freedom works. Freedom is not a magic door where everything stops hurting. Some mornings, I still missed the father I wished I had. Some nights, Lily still asked why Grandpa did not visit. I told her the truth in words a child could carry. Grandpa made choices that hurt people. And when people hurt us, we can love who we hoped they would be without letting them keep hurting us. She thought about that for a long time. Then she asked if Daniel was still her family. Daniel was outside fixing the porch step. I opened the window and called him in. Lily looked very serious. Are you my real family? Daniel knelt in front of her. If you want me to be. She threw her arms around his neck. I want. He closed his eyes, and I saw what my father never understood. Family is not a bloodline you use as a weapon. Family is who stays when staying costs something. 6 months after the wedding, the same guests who had watched my father humiliate us watched his empire collapse in the news. Some sent messages, not apologies, messages. I always thought that speech was too much. You handled it with such grace. I hope you're doing well. I did not answer most of them. Silence had once been my cage, now it was my boundary. As for my father, the legal process continued. Men like Charles Ellington rarely fall all at once. They appeal, they delay, they blame accountants, assistants, market conditions, political enemies, and ungrateful daughters. But he lost the thing he cared about most before any verdict for it was reached. He lost the room. The room no longer stood when he entered. The room no longer laughed at his jokes. The room no longer mistook wealth for virtue. And me? I kept my job for a while. Then I helped build a patient billing advocacy program for families who did not understand why hospitals were charging them impossible amounts. Daniel said that was the most grace thing I could have done. He meant it as a compliment. I took it as one. On our first anniversary, we did not throw a party. We did not invite relatives. We went to the lake house with Lily, ate grocery store cake on paper plates, and watched the sunset from the dock. Lily wore rain boots even though there was no rain. Daniel wore the same repaired sweater from our first date. I wore my mother's pearl earrings. At one point, Lily looked across the water and asked, "Is Grandpa still mad?" I thought carefully before answering Mimosa. Maybe. Is he mad at Daniel? Probably. Is he mad at me? My heart hurt. I pulled her close. No, sweetheart. And even if he was, angry people don't get to decide who belongs in our family anymore. She nodded. Then she leaned against Daniel. He wrapped one arm around her and one arm around me. For a long time, we sat there in the quiet. Not the frightened quiet I grew up with. Not the quiet of swallowing insults. Not the quiet of pretending cruelty was love. This was a different quiet. The kind my mother had meant. The kind where strong people keep their peace. My father once told me I had chosen a small life. Maybe I did, a small house by the lake, a small family at the table, a small circle of people who tell the truth. But I learned something my father never did. A life does not become small because it has less money. It becomes small when there is no room for love. And the man my father called cheap gave me something no inheritance ever could. He gave my daughter safety. He gave me proof. And when the time came, he gave my father exactly what he deserved. Not revenge shouted across a ballroom, not rage, not scandal for scandal's sake, just the truth, placed calmly on a table, with signatures, with dates, with evidence, and with a little girl's innocent question that started the end of a billionaire's lie.